when Dr. Phil told the producers, "Bring me that agreement." Nobody in the studio knew what was about to happen. The cameras kept rolling, but something in his voice made everyone freeze. His hand was already extended, waiting. The wife's face went pale. The husband looked at the floor. And in the audience, 200 people held their breath, because they sensed it. Whatever was in that envelope was about to change everything. This wasn't supposed to be that kind of episode. It started as a typical marital dispute, the kind Dr. Phil had seen 1,000 times before. But somewhere between the opening questions and the commercial break, something shifted. A single word. A nervous glance. A story that didn't add up. And Dr. Phil, with decades of reading people, caught it. What followed wasn't just television. It was a masterclass in truth, accountability, and the devastating cost of secrets kept too long. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Meghan and Kyle had been married for 15 years. High school sweethearts. 2 kids. A modest home in the suburbs. From the outside, they looked like any other American family trying to make it work. But inside their marriage, something had been rotting for years, and they both knew it. Meghan reached out to the Dr. Phil show 3 months before their taping date. Her email was short but desperate. "My husband says he loves me, but I don't believe him anymore. I need help." The producers flagged it as a standard relationship conflict and scheduled them for a taping in March. When they arrived at the studio that morning, Meghan was visibly nervous. She kept checking her phone. Kyle sat beside her in the green room, arms crossed, saying nothing. The tension between them was so thick the production assistants noticed it immediately. Dr. Phil always reviews the pre-interviews before every show. He reads the notes, watches the video submissions, and gets a sense of the people he's about to meet. But something about Meghan and Kyle's story felt incomplete. There were gaps. Inconsistencies. Things that didn't line up. He made a note in the margin of his briefing packet. Dig deeper. The taping began at 2 p.m. The audience settled into their seats. The lights came up. Dr. Phil walked onto the stage to applause, his signature confidence filling the room. Meghan and Kyle were already seated in the guest chairs, looking small under the studio lights. "So, Meghan," Dr. Phil began, leaning forward slightly. "You wrote to us and said you don't believe your husband loves you anymore. Why is that?" Meghan's voice was shaky. "Because he's always gone. He works late every night. He doesn't touch me. He doesn't talk to me. It's like I'm invisible." Kyle shifted in his seat. "That's not fair. I work hard to provide for this family." "Provide?" Meghan's voice cracked. "You're never there, Kyle. You're physically present maybe 2 hours a day. The kids ask where you are. I ask where you are." Dr. Phil watched Kyle carefully. The man's body language was all wrong. Defensive. Guarded. His eyes kept darting to the side, like he was calculating something. "Kyle," Dr. Phil said, his tone even. "Is there something you're not telling us?" "No," Kyle said quickly. Too quickly. Dr. Phil paused. The studio went completely silent. He had seen this before. The micro-expressions. The avoidance. The way someone's entire body tenses when they're holding on to a lie. And in that moment, Dr. Phil made a decision that would take the show in a completely different direction. "Hold on," he said, raising one hand. The production crew looked at each other confused. Dr. Phil never stopped mid-segment like this. He stood up from his chair and walked toward Kyle, his presence filling the space between them. "Kyle, I've been doing this a long time. And I can tell when someone is dancing around the truth. So I'm going to ask you one more time, is there something you haven't told your wife?" Kyle's jaw clenched. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair. The audience leaned forward in their seats. Kyle started then stopped. His eyes flicked to Meghan, who was staring at him with a mixture of fear and hope. "Go ahead," Dr. Phil said quietly. "Say it." Kyle's voice came out barely above a whisper. "There's an agreement." Meghan's face went blank. "What agreement?" An agreement. Kyle repeated louder now. Between me and someone else. The air in the studio changed. You could feel it, the way the temperature drops right before a storm. Dr. Phil didn't move. He just stood there, watching Kyle unravel in real time. What kind of agreement, Kyle? Dr. Phil's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. Kyle looked at the floor. A financial agreement. With someone I used to know. Used to know. Dr. Phil repeated. Or still know? Silence. And then Megan's voice, sharp and breaking. Kyle, what did you do? But Dr. Phil already knew. He could see it in the way Kyle's shoulders sagged, the way his defenses were crumbling. This wasn't just about money. This was about betrayal. This was about a secret so big it had been eating away at their marriage for years. Kyle, Dr. Phil said, his tone shifting into something more direct, more commanding. Do you have a copy of this agreement with you? Kyle shook his head. But it exists. Yes. Dr. Phil turned to the producers standing off stage. His voice was clear, decisive. Bring me that agreement. The audience gasped. Megan's hands flew to her mouth. Kyle's face drained of all color. You can't. Kyle stammered. That's private. Private? Dr. Phil's voice rose slightly, not in anger, but in disbelief. You came on this show asking for help with your marriage, and you're hiding a legal agreement that directly impacts your wife? No, Kyle. That's not how this works. One of the producers stepped forward, holding a manila envelope. Dr. Phil took it without breaking eye contact with Kyle. This, Dr. Phil said, holding up the envelope, is a copy of a financial support agreement between you and another woman. An agreement you've been honoring for the past 8 years. An agreement that has cost your family thousands of dollars. An agreement your wife knew nothing about. Megan let out a sound that was halfway between a sob and a scream. Kyle, no. No, no, no. Kyle finally looked at her, and the guilt on his face was undeniable. I'm sorry. Sorry? Megan's voice was shaking. You've been sending money to another woman for 8 years and you're sorry? Dr. Phil held up his hand again. Megan, I need you to breathe. I know this is devastating. But we're going to get through this, okay? We're going to deal with this. He turned back to Kyle, and his expression was no longer compassionate. It was cold, clinical, the look of someone who had seen too many lies and too much damage. Kyle, this agreement states that you've been paying $800 a month to a woman named Jennifer. It also states that this money is for the support of a child. A child that was born 9 years ago. The studio erupted. Gasps. Murmurs. Someone in the audience said, "Oh my God!" Megan was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. One of the producers rushed over with a box of tissues, but she didn't take them. She just sat there, staring at Kyle like she'd never seen him before. Is this true? She whispered. Kyle nodded, tears streaming down his face. Yes. You have another child. Yes. And you've been paying for this child. For 8 years. While we've been struggling. While I'd been clipping coupons and skipping meals so our kids could eat. While we almost lost our house. I didn't know how to tell you. You didn't know how to tell me? Megan's voice rose into a scream. You didn't know how to tell me that you had a whole other family? Dr. Phil stepped in. Megan, I need you to hear me. This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. Kyle made a choice. He made many choices. And every single one of them was a betrayal of you and your family. He turned to Kyle. You want to know why your wife doesn't believe you love her? This is why. Because you don't act like someone who loves her. You act like someone who's been lying to her for nearly a decade. Kyle buried his face in his hands. Dr. Phil walked back to his chair and sat down, the envelope still in his hand. The cameras captured every angle. The audience was silent, rivers streaming down faces, people holding hands, sharing the collective weight of what they were witnessing. Here's what's going to happen, Dr. Phil said. His voice was steady, authoritative, the voice of someone who had done this 1,000 times and knew exactly what needed to happen next. Kyle, you're going to be honest. For the first time in 8 years, you're going to tell your wife the whole truth. Not a version of it. Not the parts that make you look better. All of it. Kyle nodded, unable to speak. And Megan, Dr. Phil continued, his tone softening, you're going to listen. And then you're going to make a decision about what you want to do with this information. But I want you to know something, you are stronger than you think. You have been holding this family together while he was tearing it apart. And whatever you decide, I'm going to make sure you have the resources and support you need. Megan looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen. I don't know if I can do this. Yes, you can, Dr. Phil said firmly. Because you've already been doing it. You just didn't know it. The next hour was brutal. Kyle confessed everything. The affair that started 10 years ago. The pregnancy. The decision to keep the child a secret. The monthly payments that he'd hidden by falsifying work expenses and taking on side jobs Megan never knew about. The lies. The cover-ups. The times he'd looked her in the eye and sworn everything was fine. Megan listened to all of it. She cried. She screamed. She asked questions Kyle couldn't answer. And through it all, Dr. Phil sat there, a steady presence, guiding the conversation, making sure the truth came out, making sure Megan wasn't drowning in the wreckage of her marriage. At one point, Megan turned to Dr. Phil and asked, "How do I even begin to fix this?" Dr. Phil leaned forward. "Megan, I don't know if this is fixable. And I need you to hear that. This isn't about putting a band-aid on a wound. This is about deciding whether you want to rebuild from the ground up with someone who has proven he's capable of this level of deception. And that's a decision only you can make." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "But I can tell you this, if you decide to walk away, you are not giving up. You are choosing yourself. You are choosing your children. And there is nothing weak about that." The audience erupted in applause. Megan nodded, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Phil stood up and walked over to her. He handed her a card, something he didn't do often, something that signaled this was more than just a show to him. "This is the number for a family therapist I trust. She specializes in cases like this. If you decide you want to try to work through this, she'll help. If you decide you want to leave, she'll help with that too. But either way, you're not alone." Megan took the card with shaking hands. "Thank you." Dr. Phil turned to Kyle one last time. "You need to understand something. You didn't just lie to your wife. You stole 8 years from her. 8 years where she could have made an informed decision about her life. And that's something you can never give back." Kyle said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The taping ended shortly after. The audience filed out slowly, many of them visibly shaken. The producers cut to commercial, and the lights dimmed. Megan and Kyle were escorted to separate green rooms. Dr. Phil stayed on stage for a few minutes, talking quietly with his team, processing what had just happened. This was why he did this work. Not for the ratings. Not for the applause. But for moments like this, where the truth finally comes out, where someone who's been living in the dark finally sees the light, even if it's painful. 3 months later, the show received an update. Megan had filed for divorce. She and her 2 children moved in with her sister, while she figured out her next steps. Kyle was in therapy, trying to repair his relationship with all 3 of his children. The agreement he'd hidden for so long was now part of the public record, entered as evidence in the divorce proceedings. And the envelope Dr. Phil had held that day? It became a symbol. Not just of betrayal, but of the moment when the truth finally won. When secrecy gave way to honesty. When one woman decided she deserved better. Dr. Phil kept a copy of that envelope in his office. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes, the hardest thing you can do for someone is force them to face the truth. And that real change doesn't happen in the comfortable places. It happens in the moments that break you open. Because that's where healing begins. The story didn't end there. 6 months after the episode aired, Dr. Phil received a letter. It was from Megan. She wrote about the nights after the taping, when she couldn't sleep, replaying every moment in her head. She wrote about the anger, the grief, the feeling of being erased from her own life. But she also wrote about something else, clarity. For the first time in years, she wrote, I could see the truth. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That envelope you held, Dr. Phil, it wasn't just a piece of paper. It was my freedom. Dr. Phil read that letter twice. Then he placed it in a folder alongside the copy of the agreement. 2 pieces of paper. 2 different stories. One about betrayal. One about liberation. He thought about Kyle too. The man who couldn't face his own choices. The man who thought he could compartmentalize his life into neat little boxes and nobody would ever look inside. Dr. Phil had seen hundreds of men like Kyle over the years. Men who believed that as long as they kept their secrets hidden, they weren't really doing anything wrong. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. They seep into everything. They poison relationships. They destroy trust. And eventually, they explode. That's what happened in that studio. An explosion. Not of anger, but of truth. And in the wreckage, Megan found herself. Dr. Phil often tells people, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. That day, Kyle was forced to acknowledge everything. The lies. The betrayal. The other life he'd been living in the shadows. And Megan was forced to acknowledge that the man she thought she knew didn't exist. It was brutal. It was necessary. And it was real. Because that's what Dr. Phil does. He doesn't offer easy answers or comfortable lies. He offers the truth. And sometimes, the truth is the only thing that can set you free. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten.